let's talk a little bit about your opponent, Joseph Crowley. So he doesn't even live here. He lives in Virginia, but he has a house here. So if I was a rich guy or a rich woman, I could basically buy any property I want and then, represent that district. It's absurd. I mean, I guess Hillary Clinton did it a little in New York, and then, obviously Mitt Romney's doing it right now in Utah. But for a blue state like this in New York, it seems particularly egregious.
Yeah, it's tough to have representation that doesn't even live in our community. And to my opponent's credit, he was born here, so it's not like he's coming out of nowhere. But he hasn't lived here in 20 years. He raises his children in Virginia. His whole family's out there. And in the meantime, we're in crisis. And to not be able to live here, I think, is a huge detriment to representing this community properly, because the Queens of 20 years ago is not the Queens of today. And I think it's really important now more than ever for our elected officials to be a part of the communities that they're supposed to represent.
And he was one of the most ardent supporters of Hillary Clinton, came out right out of the gate. Not saying that you can't have supported her and still be a progressive, but Bernie did in the general. But it kind of goes to show if you're doing it right out of the gate where your priorities lie.
Yeah, well, I think the actual problem here is that there were so many elected officials that were part of this superdelegate system, and they participated in stacking the deck for any one candidate. Before the primaries were even underway, we had people who were already trying to cast votes one way or another, and regardless of how a person feels about that primary, I think that system is completely undemocratic.
And he's an integral part of that system as being a county chair, of the Democratic Party.
Not only is he the chairman of the local party, but he's also the head of the House Democrats, and before that he was the head of what was known as the New Democrats, which was the Corporatist Democratic Caucus in Congress.
How dare you say corporatists? I know they say you're not supposed to say that when you're running, but it's really true, because there's a wing of the Democratic Party. I know Barney Frank once said, well, what are we supposed to do? Unilaterally disarm and not take corporate money? Like, no, because the Democrats will always lose at that game because they're funding weak Democrats and strong conservatives, and that's the issue. That's why we're moving. Our policies and our politics have been shifting further and further to the right, and your opponent represents that shift.
Yeah, and I think what's so important too is that, listen, if you're a centrist Democrat and you want to advocate for more watered down liberal policies and you want to take a bunch of corporate money, go run in a swing state. Because I understand if you're running against a Republican, you may feel like you need to...
You're a Connor Lamb.
Right. I understand those races, but our community is 85% Democratic voters. And then we've got about another 10% that's independent and unaffiliated. And then you have about 8% actual Republicans. This is one of the most progressive voting districts in America. And to be represented by an official that champions the causes of Wall Street, big pharma, private equity is completely inappropriate. Let that come from somewhere else. But our job in our community is to champion the causes of Medicare for all, tuition-free college, the fight for 15. Someone has to champion the progressive movement in this country, and it should be this community.
We're talking about a representative democracy, and the representatives should represent the will of the constituents, which I guarantee you are very much more aligned with your point of view than your opponent. And for the viewers that don't really know, whoever wins this primary wins the seat. As Alex just alluded to, it's completely blue, it's solidly blue, and even especially in a year like 2018, it seems to be the case. So Crowley, how many votes did you were telling me this? He got how many votes last election?
Yeah, so this is one of the lowest turnout districts probably in the country. I wouldn't be surprised. In the borough of in the borough of Queens, he received just a bit over 5,000 votes.
How many people are in your district?
And there's 700,000 people in the district in total. So that's the thing. This race is so winnable. People say, how do you have how do you even have a prayer of winning this race? But the thing is that when the electorate is frankly, the party hasn't been doing the work of organizing the people in this community, of educating the electorate, expanding the electorate, fighting for people's right to vote, to the point that turnout is so low that this could be anybody's race. It's about who puts the boots on the ground and who organizes voters the most.
So do you think that they're not attributing resources to encourage turnout because they know it's safe blue and they don't really care who represents it?
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of apathy that's attributed to safe blue states, that we don't need to fight as hard in these states. And I think sometimes what happens is that voters get taken for granted.
It's just frustrating that it's not even about the issues. It's just about having a blue seat.
It's just about whether you're blue or red, and so long as you say you're a Democrat, sometimes you can just take any old issue that you want, and you can really be a Republican for all intents and purposes, but so long as you say you're a Democrat, sometimes people can't tell the difference.
As is the case with your opponent.
Yeah, financially, I'd definitely
Crowley.
say with the financial industry, Wall Street, things like that, that case could definitely be made. I'm excited for this primary. I'm excited to see what happens, where it goes. And one of the things, if anything, that I've learned in my race is that the presence of a primary holds our elected officials accountable almost automatically, because there's a lot of behavior that they would engage in otherwise if there wasn't this threat of them being challenged.
So you aren't in the camp of Democrats that says the primaries are hurting the party?
Oh, hell no. It makes us better. It makes our candidates better.
And you're seeing that in your race because Crowley is I guess, moving to the left on some issues because of your influence.
Yeah,
Right.
if our campaign was into here, we would have definitely seen more of the same, because, and the thing is too, is that, frankly, I think that once it gets time for a primary, it's too late. The person has the record that they have, and if you have a bad record, that speaks for itself. If you have voted for Wall Street deregulation, you voted for it.
Right. Just because he's saying this now, it doesn't mean it's going to actually change if he gets reelected and you're unsuccessful. So, yeah, I completely agree with you there. So, Crowley has deep ties to the party in the city and in the state. Do you want to take the second step and say that maybe this is an effort to kind of suppress your candidacy?
Well, what I will say is that it's pretty normal. This kind of behavior has been normalized, and we're not allowed to talk about it. It's seen as unbecoming. It's seen as, oh, you're running a negative campaign by calling attention to these issues. But the reason they continue to do it is because no one calls it out. No one calls out the corruption in the local Democratic Party. And I'm a Democrat, but no one wants to call it out. And because no one calls it out, it continues.
We were talking about self-policing earlier, about police being able to investigate, the Attorney General deciding, oh, I'm not going to bring charges against these police officers. It's the same thing. The Democratic Party, it's like they're investigating themselves, and so it's this circular corruption that keeps going on and on. I mean, we don't even need to talk about how corrupt the Republican Party is, but the Democrats, especially in a state like New York, a blue haven, are supposed to be the ones that are actually representing the people.
Yeah, and then what happens is that it's working class New Yorkers who pay, because we don't have choices in our elections, because we suppress candidates, because we make it harder for working people to run for office, because you have to have ties to wealth and the establishment and all this, that and the other. And then what happens is that we suffer, because then we don't get advocacy for Medicare for all. We don't get advocacy for a Green New Deal. We don't get advocacy for reducing the incarcerated state that we live in.